Welcome back to the podcast, you guys. I'm Kim Foster. Did you just hear me hit my chest right then? Because I definitely did. Anyways, so we've done this before. This podcast is where I outline really rough sketches of all of the thoughts constantly running through my brain. But it's also going to be the place where I interview people to work through some pressing questions that I have. This episode is going to be about a question. The question that I have as a longtime weave wearer is it possible to wear human hair extensions that are ethically sourced? And if so, where might I get them? It just so happened that when we posted something about this question on the For Harriet Instagram page, an ethically sourced Black woman-owned hair extensions company replied. Do y'all understand? Like, that's a unicorn. So I had to talk to the woman who runs this business. It's called Ayune Hair. Her name is Valerie Ogoke. She's from Los Angeles by way of Nigeria. She's Nigerian American. Now she lives in Australia. That's where she's operating this business from. We had an incredibly thoughtful and informative conversation for me. Like, Valerie knows her stuff. If you're into hair extensions, if you're not, if you want to hear about a really cool Black woman-owned business, if you want to know more about Black women's culture. I mean, weave is not Black women's culture, but, you know, we definitely blaze the trails. Keep listening. This was a cool interview. So Valerie, first of all, thank you so much for taking some time to talk to me. I have read up about your company and I am obsessed. I literally want to know everything.
Well, thank you for agreeing to chat with me. I actually was really excited when you shared that post about or you showed a video of a woman getting her hair cut for hair extensions. And the question was, like, do we really know where our hair extensions come from? Well, for me, that question kind of flickered in my mind about like 2 years ago. So I'm originally from California, but I've been living in Australia for, I would say, about 5 years. And around March of like 2016, I decided to move to Bali, Indonesia with my partner. And during that time, I was rocking like my natural hair and I wanted to, you know, change up my look as we all do and try out extensions. But in searching for hair extensions, I didn't feel like any of the companies kind of resonated with kind of my journey. And I decided to kind of take a backseat, move to Bali and, you know, just kind of focus on my spiritual journey. In that kind of spiritual journey, I just really started to question, okay, I really don't actually know where like these hair extensions come from and like, how are they sourced? How are the women being treated? And that was like the beginning of my journey of creating the brand Ayune Hair. And in creating that, the focus was making sure that it was ethically sourced, making sure that women were actually being paid for their hair extensions, and that no one was being mistreated or deceived during this process. And I also wanted to kind of get into a more sustainable frame of thought, you know, making sure that this was something that had longevity. And it wasn't that, you know, there would be a point where hair would be mixed with synthetic hair, which happens actually probably more often than we think it does. I think if you just think about in general, like the way, you know, we as humans kind of consume quite a bit, and sometimes there's really not enough to go around. And so what a lot of companies do is they find ways to mix things and make sure that it lasts a little bit longer or in order to increase their profit. But for me, I wanted to make sure that this was fair for everyone and that no one was being deceived in the process.
This is amazing. So I am a almost 30-year-old Black woman. I'm 29. I round up to 30. I have been around a lot of weave. I've been around a lot of weave for most of my life. It really never occurred to me until fairly recently that I should be morally concerned about where hair extensions come from, where weave comes from. And so I'm just wondering, before you made that trek to Bali and decided to pursue that spiritual journey, did you have any, emotional tug or moral tug about where this hair comes from?
Yeah, well, I left America in 2012 because I realized that I wanted to find my happiness and what that looked like. And it's interesting when you kind of leave your comfort zone, all of these new experiences come up. And in one of those experiences was the fact that I realized that we were all interconnected, that what I did just naturally impacts other people around me. So that was always flickering into my mind. And then in terms of the hair extensions, it didn't really cross my mind because I wasn't necessarily wearing hair extensions. I was wearing braids when I first moved over. And then when I decided to go into the hair extension or buy hair extensions just for myself, this was just about myself initially. That is when the concern kind of popped in my mind. I'm like, I really don't even know where this hair comes from. And in looking at different, I know a lot of us, do look at like AliExpress and things like that. And I saw them using pictures from other women. So then from other brands. So I just really didn't know who to trust. So that was one part. And then, I was just concerned that, am I supporting something that is disempowering another woman? And that was kind of coming across for me.
Absolutely. So where did your research begin?
Literally online, like all of us. What do we first do when we have a question? We start Googling it, right? And we're like, okay, how does the process work? Because I've been natural for 10 years, so my journey was just rocking my natural hair and braids. And so I just started Googling and trying to figure out how does it, what's the step-by-step process? And I realized the most common thing is, I think we all know, is that it's sourced from Indian temples, right? I think that's what we all kind of initially think, because women, usually in poorer areas in India, go to temples to sacrifice. It's kind of like a spiritual sacrifice to, I don't know, I'm just going to put quote unquote gods. And that was all I kind of knew. And then the other part is that often it's usually men travel to really rural areas around Southeast Asia, or even in China, and they just cut hair. Mm-hmm. But what I didn't realize is that no one was really getting paid for any of this, So that was a huge concern. I'm like, who's making the money? Because there's a 300% profit that these people are getting because they're not necessarily paying these women anything.
So so they're not getting paid any money?
Very, very little. And when I really started to reach out to vendors, I don't ever tell people my intentions because I want them to be very honest with me. So I just ask them, what is your relationship with the women that you're sourcing hair from? And they don't know what my intentions are. So they always tell me the truth, because I don't think that they don't know the vision that I have, of making sure that the women are treated fairly. And a lot of times, they would tell me that they would just give them food and water, or they would give them very little. So it wasn't, it was concerning that, other people were making a lot of money, but the women who were providing, the hair extensions weren't really getting anything out of it. Wow. That was the first thing. The other thing is that how sustainable is it for a woman to cut their hair? I mean, we start at 14 inches, right? But a lot of us go to 18, 20, 22, sometimes 24 inches. That's a lot of hair off of one head. How sustainable is that? So then my other question is, are we really wearing real human hair extensions?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, yeah.
I'm just trying to think of in my peak weave days when I was, really priding myself on buying the most expensive Malaysian or whatever. I feel like I've maybe paid $200 a bundle, maybe even more. I feel like it's a lot of money. And especially if you're buying 2 or 3, like that's hundreds of dollars. And so these women are only being compensated. And and it takes a long time to grow your hair to be
Right.
22. So these women are being compensated. If they're being compensated, they're only getting food, water, minimal actual money. That's crazy to me.
Yeah, it's really concerning. And I was actually really excited when I believe Refinery 29 just recently shared like a short docu-series where they did travel. I think they were in Vietnam, and it was the same discussion. Like, are these women being paid? And I mean, the answer was no. They're not really gaining that much out of it. And I do think, and this is not to, we're not really pointing fingers here, because the whole point of this is to practice mindfulness. Like, it's impossible for us to be perfect. We can't save the world, but we can try to be more mindful about the things that we do throughout our lives. So if we're in a financial space where we can afford to support something that is more uplifting or, for the conscious consumer, then let's do that. But if we can't, like, don't beat yourself up for that. So it's really just, we're not playing a blame game. We're just trying to be more mindful.
Absolutely. You mentioned something I'm so curious about, the sustainability part. I never thought about this before, but there is no way that all this weave is human hair. I never considered it, but can you talk a little bit more about the mixing of human hair with synthetic hair and how we might be getting duped in buying this super, super expensive weave that's not even, 100% Indian?
Yeah. So I should start by saying that this is not everyone. I'm sure there are a lot of businesses that are selling real human hair extensions. So we're not like painting everyone with the same, as the same kind of deceptive business owner. But I think one of the telltale signs is if you're buying like 3 bundles for $150, $200, it's likely that it's mixed with synthetic hair. That's one. And it's likely that it's not actually like Malaysian is actually not. In my research in trying to find hair extensions, Malaysian hair extensions is not really a thing. And there are Cambodian hair extensions, there are Indonesian, there are Vietnamese, but in searching Malaysia, there wasn't any. And the same for Brazilian. But one thing is that for sustainable hair extensions, for me, it's all about how the natural process of how our hair strands fall. So every day we have 50 to 100 hair strands that fall out of our scalp. So these women, and particularly for my business, they collect their hair strands, which is really meticulous and time consuming, but it ensures that they never feel pressure to cut their hair, because what we're trying to bring back is choice rather than pressure. And so if they feel a really deep connection with their hair, which I'm sure you can agree, Kim, like we all have close connections with our hair, like our natural hair. And sometimes we want to shave it and that's fine. But sometimes we want to just like rock our natural hair. And so we have to be mindful that other women feel the same way, especially like indigenous people. And so what our women do is that they collect their hair strands and then they sell it. And so this is a sustainable process because naturally you have so much hair that falls out of your hair a day. And sometimes you can have about 150 hair strands. And what they do is they just collect it all and then they sell it to our vendors. So we never collect any hair that's actually cut from a woman's head. And so they never ever feel like they have to do that because of their financial circumstances.
Okay.
Yeah.
Malaysian hair is not a real thing.
I feel quite lucky because in living in Perth, Western Australia, like Southeast Asia is just like a hop. It's literally to fly to Bali is like 3 hours. To fly to Malaysia. When I lived in Indonesia for a year, I often went to Malaysia and Singapore and different places. And in searching for actual like Malaysian hair, I did not find that. And in doing research and watching other documentaries, they didn't find it either. So just from my research, I did not find any. And also, if people know about like Malaysia and the different cultures, there are the Malays, which look more Indonesian, and then you have a lot of South Indians. So potentially, if someone is sourcing hair from Malaysia and it's probably very little, then it's probably just Indian hair. Um, but yeah, I would be very cautious. I think people should probably be more mindful of like, is this really like, what are the chances that this is Brazilian hair? Like, what are the chances that women are actually cutting their hair in Brazil? In talking to, when I was in Los Angeles, I spoke to a Brazilian hair. He used to sell hair extensions. He said that there were no Brazilian hair, that like he didn't get them from Brazil. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about your company. So after doing this initial research, when did you decide that you wanted to start a hair extensions company?
Well, so initially it was just the beginning of like my move to Indonesia. It was just a spiritual journey and understanding like my connection to everything around me. And then I just had this kind of epiphany that I could align like my desire to share my passion for kindness and compassion with, or align it with beauty. So I began kind of just researching, and what I decided to do was eventually travel to the villages. All initially, well, actually, every time all on my own, which was it was kind of venturing to the unknown. But what I realized was that really made it a authentic journey for me, because I was there with the vendors. I was there meeting with.
Want to hear the rest of this episode? All you gotta do is sign up to become a patron on our Patreon. For $2 a month, you get access to every single episode of the podcast. Sign up.